What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Sales Cast podcast. On the episode today, we're going to talk about a few different things that have to do with ROI, maybe not saying ROI, but really what we're trying to boil it down to is how do you quantify the cost of inaction, and then how do you measure the success if you do find it. But Jed, this was kind of your episode that we wanted to kick off, so I'll kick it to you.
Yeah, so this kind of like the idea for this sparked after we did kind of like a demo with Orem, their power dialing software. And what I noticed from that demo with them is they got right down to the numbers. So during discovery, they were asking, it's a dial software, so they were asking things like, what's your connect rate? How many calls per day are you making? How many demos do you need for this to kind of make sense? And they built a really strong ROI, and helped me kind of really like visually see, I guess, why it would make sense to invest in them, based on what we're currently doing. And so I've been trying to figure out how to implement this into our process at Mailshake, because I've noticed this, and you guys can probably both speak to this. Whenever you bring up like ROI calculators on demo calls, both as a sales rep myself and I'm being on the receiving end of a demo, oftentimes they don't feel believable or you're not fully bought in. And I think they kind of get a bad rap, in sales. So Luke, like I know you've done this a lot, ROI calculators, and Max, you too, but what's worked for you when trying to build up ROI, and how do you get the customer to actually buy into it?
Yep. Actually, I got a question in return for you. Is what makes you think that the ROI is not believable, or why aren't you bought in as a buyer?
It's usually because they told me what the ROI is, right? Usually our customers see this, here's what you can expect, those sort of things. They kind of just jump steps in between the process and jump straight to the ROI.
Okay, so they might skip the value building steps, the discovery, and get to the point of, hey, here's the ROI. We're going to make you $1 million easy. And you just don't buy it, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. And that's where most ROI calculators can go wrong, is you're skipping the important steps of the sale, which is discovery. What is the cost of inaction? What happens if you guys don't solve this problem? And then do you actually believe that the solution can solve your problem? There needs to be trial closing steps before the ROI calculator. And that ROI calculator, in my opinion, is just another trial closing step. Do you guys believe in this, and do you believe the ROI? And so where I've seen ROIs go wrong is sales reps think this is their opportunity to promise the world and showcase a monumental ROI. We're not giving you a 10x return. We're giving you a 20x return on your investment.
Mm-hmm.
That becomes less believable. So what I've done in the past to kind of flip the script here is, once I get the number of dials, for example, number of connects, number of meetings that you want to book, I'm plugging that in as I'm talking with the prospect. And I'm like, these numbers are correct, right? You believe in these. This is what we're looking for. Then I start chopping them in half. I'm going to take number of dials. Let's chop that in half. Number of connects, chop that in half. Connect rate, chop that in half. Do you believe that this would still be successful for you? Yes or no? Yes, great. We're looking at a 5x ROI, because this is the worst case scenario, and I want to under promise and over deliver on the solution. But would you guys buy in at 5x ROI with the potential upside of 10x or 15x ROI? You need to get them bought in on the concept, and then on a lower entry point is what I've seen work well in the past. Max, I don't know if you've done differently.
No, I love that. I love that line. I think the big thing that you said there is it's cool to show them those numbers, get them to tell you like, hey, how many calls do you have? How many connects do you get? Out of those connects, how many of those turn to opportunities? Out of those opportunities, how many turn to deals, right? And you get all that information from them, and then you chop it in half. Like that's a real pivotal moment, right? Because you're saying, hey, let's just take your actual numbers, cut them in half, and then we'll see what the ROI on that is. So worst case scenario that you could possibly think of for performance for a given month, let's take that and see what kind of revenue that you'll get back just from using our tool. So that's the thing that I like the most. My this kind of ties in a little bit in showing ROI. The first thing that I want to say is I've always been like a hater of trials and allowing your prospects to run a trial. Um, a lot of times I always felt, especially when I'm the one buying the software, I always feel like if I can use it and see how it works, and I'm going to know if this works for my org. A lot of times you're going to be running into buyers that are not very sophisticated or educated in your space. So you run the risk of them coming to you with 1,000,001 questions about how the product works. And then you get to the situation where it's like, okay, this is becoming a support call when this should really be a sales call. So that's why I've always had hesitations towards it. And I didn't really get opened up to how a real trial could be run until I did a trial with Gong. So recently purchased Gong. They're not a sponsor or anything, so this is just me being nice.
A lot of free ads today.
Yeah, this is just me being nice. So I asked for the trial, right? Because I want to see, how does this work? How's this going to affect my team? What am I going to get out of this? Is this just a call recorder? What is it going to do? Which was my justification for the trial. And A came back to me and he was like, look, I'll let you play with the product for a month if you can give me hard success criteria of, if we can do these things for you, then you'll move forward with us. And if you can get yourself as well as Ryan, who's our VP of sales, to agree that those are hard and fast metrics that we can justify, then I'll let you run that trial. And so I went back to Ryan, and this is the A didn't tell me to have this conversation. I said, okay, cool. Like I can probably put a list together for you. So I went back to Ryan and I was like, hey, what are going to be like the top 3 or 4 things that we really need to get out of this, that we're looking to get out of it, in order for us to make a good business case to our CFO to purchase this tool? Because I really wanted Gong, but we needed to come up with a business case to our CFO as to why we were going to get rid of this budget for a new tool. And so we came up with like 3 or 4 things that we really wanted to get out of it, that we felt like we could get out of it. And then I went back to the AE, kind of walked him through the conversation that we had, and he helped me create actual measurable things that we could see within Gong that would show us, quote unquote, ROI, or what I wanted to see in order for that to be considered a successful trial. So he walked me through how to use it, how to set up the users. We spent like 45 minutes on that piece. We got it all set up, and then we had these key business metrics, and we met once a week until that trial was up. And needless to say, we obviously bought Gong. We were able to put together a really strong business case as to why it worked. So I like how we can go back to, like you said, Luke, the actual prospect, and say, give me your metrics. And we can plug them into this calculator and show you the value that we'll bring back. In this case, what I loved is that the metrics that I got were pulled from the tool that they were trying to sell to me. And so not only did I come up with the success criteria, but I actually saw the real data that I told them I wanted within the tool. So it made it that much more powerful. And I never looked at trials that way and how it could drive ROI. So I don't know if that fully answers your question on what you asked me, Luke, but that's kind of like my thought process now moving forward, is like, how do I deliver that value to a prospect?
Yeah. How do you get you to line up next steps and meet weekly?
He was just basically, what he did was he said, this is a part of the process. You kind of like, this is what we have to do. Like he said something along the lines of, I don't exactly remember what he said, but he said like, our chief product officer or our like VP of sales or something like that requires us to do these weekly check-ins during a trial. It was something
Did you
along those
believe him?
lines. Not really, but if I wanted the trial, so I was like, I'll just fucking take it. You know what I mean? Like, I want the trial, so sure, I'll meet with you for 15 minutes just to make sure it's going well. So yeah.
Okay.
The,
Because I'm wondering if there might be situations where you could have, if you weren't all in on buying Gong, you could have come up with some fake metrics, and a sales rep could get caught in a trap of playing a support person for weeks on end to
For
reach
sure.
out. My CFO said no. Do you think that's a possibility?
Yeah, 100%. So I think that's why it's really important to vet out why each of those success criteria that you came up with is important to that person. So like, if I'm the AE, right, and the individual that I'm trying to create those success metrics comes to me and they're actual bull, like BS metrics, and they don't matter to them, you need to dive into like, okay, if we hit that metric, what impact does that have on your sales team? Why is that actually important as a success criteria? And if it's not, can we replace it with one that is? So get them to tell you why it's important, and then for sure it is. If they can't tell you, then it's just bullshit, and they're just doing it so they can get their hands on the product.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're not skipping steps in that instance. You're leveraging the ROI tool to potentially do more discovery.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so, Jed, I'm wondering if that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where ROI calculators and other things get bad raps because they're not being used properly. Is it a means or is it an end? And that's what I might ask you.
Yeah, no, I think it is a means, because, and I'll give you another example too. We we had a follow-up call on Monday We've been meeting with these people like 3 times, and they finally brought in their C-level to come take a look. And part of the issue was when he went on the call, he wasn't fully aware of what the problem was and like the justification for buying Mailshake. And so we try to lean on our champion because he's like, we got to go back, look at this for a couple weeks and figure out if there's really a problem here. Like saw the whole demo and everything. Problem was we hadn't really built a strong enough ROI with the champion before. So if we had done that, we could have said, well, hold on, and talked to the champion who was also on the call and said like, hey, we agreed when we spoke a couple weeks ago that like X, Y, and Z was a problem. And you thought that by using Mailshake, we can increase that by whatever amount. Has anything changed there? Or have you discussed that with, the decision maker was on the call? And that was like the key piece we were missing, right? Because we didn't have that information. It was kind of weak. We were kind of like, oh yeah, I mean, we already talked about, and it was like a vague answer basically in terms of the ROI. And so I think when you have really specific ROI that's clean and measurable and that your champion agrees on, it makes that a lot easier to kind of like what Max was saying, package and sell to the decision maker. Because it's showing real value to them. But yeah, I mean, I think for having follow-up calls, building that ROI and that initial discovery call is huge. It'll make them far more impactful. It's something we're trying to work on.
Yeah, that's another thing. I'm wondering if people are rushing to get decision maker meetings done too quickly.
I mean, that's a good question. When do you think it makes sense to involve a decision maker?
Well, hopefully first call.
Yeah.
Because you want to sell the software immediately.
So then are you rushing at all in that case?
Well, it depends on who you contact and who you get on the call first time. However,
Sure.
What I'm thinking about in your instance is if you've gone through a 15 or 20-minute discovery meeting where you covered some basic spin questions, said, hey, we need to talk to decision makers, have you actually built any sort of value or built up the pain of not solving this to the point where not only you, but your champion can articulate it to the decision maker? Or are we hoping the next call goes well? That could be a potential issue where if you jump to ROI, you jump to solutions, you jump to this is what future state could look like. We might be missing some steps. Yeah. So I never am a fan of slowing down cycles, but maybe we should in this sort of instance.
Yeah, because at that point, right, like you don't know if you actually covered all the steps on that first call. So once you do get on that second call with that decision maker, are you determining whether this is a deeper sales cycle conversation, or am I just going to rerun the way I did the first call and try and cover all those steps again? Because if you jump into like a deeper sales cycle type of conversation and you didn't build that intent and that value and that momentum in the deal, then it kind of gets dicey, right? And you lose control of the conversation.
Exactly. And I'm looking back at my old deals that I run, just kind of reflecting. It's like, okay, the ones that have gone horribly is where I'm just forcing steps. There's no engagement and I'm not actively testing my champion early in the cycle. It seems like this might not be a problem you want to solve. We're not a fit for everybody. Do you even believe in this? Trial questions that pull them in by pulling back. Those are some tips and tricks that I've used to actually validate that this is something worth pursuing. I'm all for working 120 or 150 deals in my pipeline at any time, but there actually needs to be a chance for it to close. Right. And so that's what you're validating with those types of questions.
Yeah. I think the other thing that has been helpful for my team, specifically when we're running some of these deals, is this is something that I learned from you way back in the day, Luke, and it's just talking to people in a way that, like, if you're explaining something, right, you want to be able to explain it as if you're talking to a 5-year-old, right? And so the one thing that I don't want to do on these conversations is like, let me show you my ROI calculator, or what do you think the return on investment is going to be? I try to like avoid those conversations, or those terms rather, and I try to make it as relatable as I can to them. And so when I'm trying to find out the information that I need in order to show them the value, I'm asking those questions in terminology that they're giving me. Kind of going back to our earlier conversation about the ROI piece. And so it's more so getting away from, let me show you this ROI calculator and show you what the value is. Let me do that during the discovery process where I'm using the terminology that they use to describe their own business so that I can get hard numbers. And then at the end, I can walk them through using their language, the way that ROI actually make sense without saying, hey, let me show you a return on investment calculator, or let me show what the ROI on going with PandaDoc will be, and kind of just making it more relatable and talking about, how it's a little bit easier to understand versus just showing them numbers on a calculator and saying, does this make sense, basically. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Luke.
Absolutely. Just mirroring their words. And that's where note taking can come in. If you notice something weird they've said, they say proposal instead of contract. They say agreement instead of terms and conditions. You can use those sort of language tidbits to ingrain yourself with the prospect and be on the same page with them. Because you want to be able to explain it like a 5-year-old can understand it. Well, prospects are emotional because they're in pain and they need to solve something. So they're like a 5-year-old. So that's the reasoning behind using their language and terminology they understand, is to be able to communicate well and use the right terminology. So it might not be an ROI calculation. This might be a business case. This might be a reason to implement something. This might keep you guys from missing out on your Q2 goals. That's hard to say. So stuff like that can actually lead to a much more impactful ROI versus just, hey, here's our ROI calculator on how we help you guys close deals faster and accelerate sales cycle, and all the buzzwords that you hear from Silicon Valley. Most people don't talk like that. Put it in the words that they can understand. So yeah, I think, is there anything we're missing here? Jed, did that cover what you wanted to cover in the beginning?
No, it did, but I think one of my biggest takeaways is that there's a difference between an ROI calculator or determining ROI and building a business case. So good stuff, good takeaways.
It's a tool in the toolbox, but you still need to do the other stuff to close the deal.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, this has been the Salescast podcast, where we make prospecting simple and closing predictable. Catch you
All right,
next time.
guys, close more deals. We'll see you.